Hello, everyone. This is Mitch Ashley. I'm pleased to be joining you today for a very special event. Welcome wherever you are in the world, whether it's in the morning or midday, evening, maybe even nighttime. So we're just thankful that you're here with us today. So we have a great topic. It's on our Got DevOps series, if you remember the Got Milk commercials. We kind of borrowed that phrase around really relooking and examining different parts of DevOps and where are we today? Because if you think about it, we've been practicing DevOps for a while. At least it's been around for a while. Maybe you're new to it, maybe you've been doing it in your organizations for a while too. We're going to focus on DevSecOps, a term that a lot of us are familiar, but it has had a lot of definitions. And we're going to take a fresh look at it, both from the software that we're creating, security of it, but also the supply chain underlying that software and the tool chains that we use to create software. So I have the great pleasure of once again being joined by two who are becoming my favorite people because I just end up on another panel with you. So I just am going to claim you as my favorite people. All right. And that is Martin Reynolds, who's Field CTO with Harness, and Hope Lynch, who is Senior Director of Platforms at CloudBees. Welcome to you both. Martin, would you introduce yourself? And then Hope, would you?
Sure, yeah. So a field CTO now at Harness, but honestly, 30 years as an engineer, building stuff, deploying it in a whole raft of industries from healthcare to finance to education. So kind of I come very much from the hands-on world, but discovered DevOps 8 years ago or so, and then kind of changed my trajectory quite a bit.
So
And here I am now.
as we say in Colorado, same cowboy, different rodeo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hope.
Good morning, everyone. I have been in technology many, many moons. I think Mitch and I have had this conversation. My first real tech job was help desk. I've done everything from punching cable, pulling wire, server rooms when server rooms were really a thing, to working on platform engineering teams and, as they used to be called, systems engineering teams. But now at CloudBees, senior director of platforms. So anything and everything dealing with the platform. I'm learning about it and staying up to date and just enjoying it. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Very good. Great to have you both. And as I mentioned, I'm Mitch Ashley. I am principal analyst with Techstrong Research and also CTO with Techstrong Group, the folks that to help put this on. But also want to recognize and thank our sponsors, both your representative companies, CloudBees and Harness, as well as JFrog, for helping us sponsor this series and being part of these conversations. We don't have our JFrog folks here today, but they're here with us in spirit. So we thank them as well. So thanks to your companies for helping us bring this to our audience. One of the things I'd like to say about this conversation is that it is a conversation. All of us have been doing DevOps, have been doing security, have been doing DevSecOps as part of our work, whether it's creating software ourselves or as part of our companies and the product and services that we offer. So we're going to try to share as much practical hands-on experience as we relook at this and kind of lay the path out going forward to try to help all of us advance the security of the software and the underlying technologies that we use. To do that, we would love to have you join us and talk to us, comment in the chat. Some of you are already saying, hello, welcome. I'm in Denver, Colorado. That's what I'm typing right now. So we'd love to hear where you're joining us, friend. And even more importantly, we'd love to have you comment, put your reactions, your thoughts, those kind of things into chat. You will ask questions, anything you want. Everything's fair game. You can do that in the Q&A tab up in the top. You can throw it into the chat too. And we will do our best to incorporate that into our conversation. So that's what really makes this fun, is when we kind of get a dialogue going, not just between the three of us, but with all of us and a number of folks that are in our audience. And if you've been part of that, it's a lot of fun. So please, we want to hear what you think, because you all are living this journey too, in your own way. So let's turn it to the topic. I'm going to lay out a premise, and you all can say agree, somewhat agree. You're I don't know what you're doing there in Colorado, but it's not the same thing we're doing here in London, and I forgot where you are, Hope, in Texas. Is that where you are?
Oh, I'm in Charlotte.
Charlotte, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. It is because I come from both the software and a security world. I've kind of had feet in both, and sometimes at the same time, and certainly do now. And one of the things that the security world did for a long time was carve things up and create silos. Okay, I have a firewall. I have intrusion prevention system. I have a network access control system. I have an identity management system. And you kind of, as long as you had one of those filled out, seemed like you had pretty good security. And we realized that just having something on the shelf for everything does not mean you're secure. You have to think about it holistically. You had to think like platforms from that sense. And we kind of did the same thing with DevSecOps, where we said, oh, it's shift left. If we just have the developers worry about security while they're writing code, while they're doing everything else, we're shifting left at the same time, like testing and quality and compliance and whatever else we thought we were going to ask them to do. And they pushed back and said, hey, I got plenty to do. We need to do this differently. So we moved to this era of, well, it's the security people or maybe a security champion that understands software working with the software teams to try to build in software. And I think that's a valid premise, but we work in a world where security issues can be introduced, intrusion or, damage, break-in, whatever it might be, can happen at any point in the process of creating software, whether it's the software we build and run and operate, or the underlying tool chain and technology, open source packages, anything that goes into the making of it or the tools that we use to make it. So I think of it as two things. One is the entire SDLC for DevOps, all parts of it, right? Whether for planning to, doing SRE work in production, and then also the underlying tech platforms and technologies we use to create software and the input sources, output sources to that open source package managers, DevOps tools, repository, CI/CD platforms, testing, whatever it is. Any of those are a point of entree. Okay, so one of the things I tell panelists is, so one rule is don't monologue. So I just broke my own rule, and I'll try not to do that again. So whoever wants to take, fling arrows and, shots at me, feel free, because we want to make this better. And, that's just kind of how I'm trying to put it all together. So feel free to chime in.
There's a whole lot in what you just said. I feel like the rest of the session is going to be unpicking that monologue.
He wanted to give us something to work with.
Yeah. I'm wondering which bit to pick with, and I actually, because I can obviously see my own face because of the camera, I saw my own face screw up when you were talking about. I was like doing when you were talking about, it's just shift left, right? We get the developers to do more. That has always been one of my pet hates, because I genuinely still believe, and I probably repeated this more times than I should, but that shift left is just giving them the right information at the right time. So shift the information left, but not the work. I don't want my engineers to necessarily be security experts. I want them to be security aware, but that is a very different thing, right? And I think, kind of just saying, no, that it's all going to go left. I mean, we know it doesn't work. Right? But it is that thing of you've got to give them the right information at the right time so they can make smart choices, because they're generally pretty smart people. They can make the right choices, the smart choices, and maybe resolve an issue that they're introducing, or maybe just not introduce it. Right. But it's about giving them the information. You still need those security teams there to kind of help, understand what the right information is to give them. Right. What is the right information? And I'm going to say one more thing and then stop monologuing. I don't want to monologue, and that's going to be the theme for the whole session now. And it kind of actually relates to what Hope said in the last webinar I did with Hope. Is that thing of, actually security starts from right before you write a line of code. Security starts, and this is extra relevant in platform engineering, I think. But security starts as far left as you can get it. Design your architecture to be secure. Design your platform to be secure. Then your applications have security requirements to build on top of that. And so it's definitely not a let's just move it from one person to another. It's definitely holistic. And then it's about getting the right information at the right time. But I do. They're my first two. I have more based on what you said, but I feel like I'm going to stop for a second and take a breath because see if you agree, disagree.
One thing that occurs to me as well with this, when a lot of organizations are talking about shift left, they think it's just as simple as, yeah, let's dump everything on the development team. But as part of what you were saying, Martin, for them to get the right information at the right time, to be able to read the right signals and be these, T-shaped people that are deep in understanding development and know enough about the other things to know when something looks wrong, that takes dollars, that takes budget, that takes prioritization from the organization, right? So you can't just say, let's shift. And I saw this once. Shift left was, oh, can't the developers just write scripts for everything? So now their mountain of work increased. They are doing way too much research. And I guess you know what happened next. Things sort of started to fall apart. So shift left can work, but shift left needs to be funded too. A lot of organizations do not fund it well.
I kind of like one of the things that you said, Martin, was shift left isn't moving the work left. Shift left, you said sharing information, but you also said shift left is about where we start working on security, right? So it's all the way in the design and the architecture, right? Whether it's the platforms you're building stuff with, you're going to run them on, or the application architecture, the app and the code that you're both creating and using. The way the analogy I like to use is, you don't ask for airbags on your car after it rolls off the manufacturing.
No, you do not.
No.
It's a little late, and they'll look pretty ugly if you did try to do that. The aftermarket airbags ain't so great. That's why there's no aftermarket airbags. So it has to be designed in. Otherwise, you're just patching things at best. Patchwork at best. So the other thing that shift left tend to fall upon was, let's do scanning for vulnerabilities in the code we're creating. Also in images and source libraries and things like that too. So it's expanded beyond just the code we write, which is also an important thing to do, but it's not all of it, right?
No, it really isn't. So yes, absolutely. You want to do things like code scanning, and honestly, I don't know, and there's so many code scanners and vulnerability scanners out there. That's almost a minefield in its own right. I'm going to come back to that a little bit, but in the kind of the more general thing about that, if you like, shifting the design left and making sure you're not bringing in those vulnerabilities with you. It's not just the scanning of them. It's actually how you manage them. It's actually how you manage those libraries that you import. It's how you make sure that they're still, because most dependencies, and depends on the language a little bit, but if you, I like using Node.js as an example, because you can bring in a Node.js dependency and you think you're bringing in one, and then you look at that dependency map and you've got like 10 deep of dependencies, and and what are you actually introducing? How many vulnerabilities do you really introduce when you do that? And what are you actually using that thing for? And can you just write it? Like so you kind of have to be smart about it. Often they don't know till it's too late, right? The scan happens almost too late. You want it. I mean, in an ideal world, what I'd really like is, I'm writing my code and I do it. And because I'm a good developer, I commit often, even to my branch before. And when I try and push my code, what I really want is, hey, do you know you've added this library and it's going to add this vulnerability and that breaks our policy? And you're in context, in the moment, understanding the code, and you can go, okay, maybe I can find a different one, or actually that doesn't really apply to us, but you can make a smart decision and stop it early, and rather than just scan it late.
Right.
Right, because even at the PR stage, sometimes I pushed it and I'm doing my PR and I'm going to do my scans. Even that feels too late sometimes.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to the other thing about scanning. By the way, I genuinely feel like most companies now, they definitely use more than one. Right, there's probably like code quality, maybe 1, 2, 3 different security scanners. They might have like, I don't know, they might have GitHub Advanced Security. They're using SonarQube. They're, I don't know, using some of the open source linters and testing. And like, you still need a way to have one view of that data, because I think otherwise, there's nothing worse than 5 scanners scanning the same vulnerability 5 times that end up as 5 tickets in your backlog that are 5 things that you're like, wait, didn't I fix this?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I do think there's a visibility piece there, and, you need something that's going to let you see that for sure.
But not only that, but I think one of the advances that is great is seeing those in context, right? So if you see an alert and oh, we see this alert all the time, but this alert, it's not a high priority for us. It's not something that should go in the backlog. And having systems that are intelligent enough to be able to manage that type of work. So the things that are surfaced are actually the critical items that maybe are true secure vulnerabilities or things that are trending in that direction that then you can go and manage. Everyone's been in an alert storm at some point in their life, and it's been a terrible experience. But now we have the capability with AI and other tools that we can get more intelligent notifications, and we can get a better idea of where the vulnerabilities actually lie.
Yeah. And honestly, I've seen them getting smarter and smarter too. Like following up on that, I'm seeing more and more of those security systems that actually don't, they say, hey, you've got this vulnerability, and normally, the CVE says this is a medium, but actually you've got this CVE, and we know it's talking to this database over here, right? And this database has PII in it, right? It has personal identifier, or it has financial information, whatever it is. And it says, I'm going to take that medium, and I'm going to make it a critical, because the two things together, suddenly those things make more sense. So like that context aware security that you're talking about, I think is kind of vital going forwards, and it's going to be ongoing. It's a bit like that, understanding all the things in your supply chain and things that can get injected when you bring in those dependencies that you rely on. You need systems that are actually, the minute that there's a problem, you kind of need to know, and somebody needs to make that decision. Hopefully it can be smart enough to know what it alerts you with and what it doesn't. But still, I have a dependency, it's 6 deep in my dependency that I brought in. But actually, if I don't change that, they can get into my systems. It's a route into my systems, right? Because I still feel like the most common way of getting into systems is actually, the software, rather than like, I think the days of hacking a hardware firewall, or, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It just feels like it's not the easy route for people to get into your software.
No.
Let me throw a monkey wrench in here then. So we've been talking a lot about the developer part of it, just because I like to mix things up. Suddenly XZ shows up in the in the encryption module in Linux, in some of the Linux distributions, and poof, we've got a major vulnerability. It has to do with actually identity, and that's maybe used in a lot of our development, test, multiple production environments, maybe multiple clouds. Who knows where that is? And that's deep down, right? You're talking about the operating system level yet. I never wrote any of that code, more or less tested it, more or less thought about it. That the bottom of the stack, if you don't think of our, or the code and the stack that it's operating on, anywhere in that is subject to, either attack or a vulnerability and need to be patched. So it may not even be the developer that ever touches that. That may be, a platform team that goes and says, yeah, we need to fix that. And we're going to work with the QA team to test before we roll out, or
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So DevSecOps can't be just dev, is my point.
No,
Right.
I,
Right.
I mean, I'm gonna go a little lateral for a second.
Okay.
I already
I
can
want
see that Hope
you
has
can
a
go
really good
lateral.
answer for this.
Let's go for it.
So I know you're going to answer the security thing, but I do have a thing about that, like DevOps in general and DevSecOps or Dev whatever ops. I
Mhm.
saw a talk years and years and years ago, really early when I was on my own DevOps, experience journey, and somebody put this slider, and it basically said DevSec, prod, fine, like finance, sales,
The whole
ops.
chain.
Yeah,
/ops.
because they were basically saying like we're all DevOps, right? It's more of a thing about the culture and the way you operate and the way you collaborate, and you need all of those bits. And I think that kind of plays to your point about,
Mhm.
where does that security stack live? And no, it doesn't all sit with the developer who wrote the code. It sits with the people who write the platform. It sits with the people who operate the underlying infrastructure that you may run on, whether that's
Mhm.
AWS, Google, whether it's your own private cloud. Like there's a whole stack there, right? And
Mhm.
I think ultimately there's a shared responsibility, and that has to happen. And if it doesn't, I don't think it works. Too much breaks, and that the example you're giving is a good one, because I did see
Mhm.
some of the impacts of that and how you had to, quickly you're saying, well, it's in all these containers that we use. So now we're going to have to update all those base containers, which then feed into the build processes. And hey, how many scripts exist out there that run that? And do we need to fix those?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think though, Mitch, when you talk about the operating system, right? What if you have a vulnerability in your operating system? It does take me back to, when you install, you are only installing the necessary services. You have your security settings configured properly. You have some guidelines for hardening, right? That may not solve everything, but some of those things that may have become an issue now, maybe you have mitigated it. You can patch and you can update, and it covers that issue. It takes care of it at some point when the vendor or whoever figures it out. But maybe you totally mitigated it because you turned off the things that aren't needed. You harden your systems, and you just aren't leaving everything open. It's tough when it is coming from the vendor, but yeah, manage it the best you can. And it's a vendor nightmare, but we all know it does happen.
It does happen, and there's even, we touch a lot of things through APIs, through SaaS services, and that are part
Hmm.
of our
Hmm.
applications and the infrastructure. Don't ever touch its code, but
Right.
that gets compromised in some way. We're potentially compromised in some way.
Yeah.
Martin, you said the shared security, shared risk. One of the things I like to say is, just because you're sharing the risk doesn't mean it isn't still your risk. It's still your risk,
Oh no, I agree. It's still
right?
your risk. Yeah, absolutely.
Shared doesn't mean I passed it off and you got it now. It's not a hot potato.
No,
It's like I
yeah.
spoiled the potato, right?
No, that's like that's almost like saying, shift left is it's somebody else's problem, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You keep
exactly.
shifting left.
It's an
So
SCP.
I
It's
want
like
to
somebody
talk
else's problem.
a question that Saba's been commenting. I'm sorry, Suba, if I'm saying your name wrong, I apologize. Rao has been commenting in our chat channels, as well as post a couple questions, or at least a question here. So if shift left has been the norm, kind of what most people have described DevSecOps, what's the new norm? And I feel like we should jointly write a paper about this. Is it like kind of level one is the underlying technology used to create what we're building, and level two is the things we're building and all the software that it depends on, and layer
Hmm.
three is the external things that we rely upon that can inject security issues? And whether it's open source software or an API or a service from a cloud provider, and kind of build a model like that. And I like the way you said for DevOps, like, well, it's dev and it's test and it's FinOps and it's AI ops, it's data ops, it's everything ops, right? Which is just about sharing the principles. It seems like that kind of a model. We need some kind of diagram or model like that to say this is really what DevOps or DevSecOps is today. Agree? Or will you sign up to create that while we're on this panel right now? No.
I mean, get that virtual whiteboard out. I've
Yeah,
got my
we
pen
can
somewhere
give it a
here.
We should have one of those interpretive artists doing drawing what we're talking.
Absolutely. It's an interesting one because I feel like, if you're talking about that like development lifecycle, the software development lifecycle, for the full end-to-end from ideation through to operation and back again, right? Because that's cyclic loop. I think as things mature, and I feel like the way we do security generally is maturing, but I do feel like it needs to be kind of interwoven through all the stages. It's not you do this and then you do security and then you're done. It's like, no, security exists at the start. It exists during when you're coding. It exists when you're building. It exists once that artifact is created. You need to know where that is, right? You need to know what's in it. Then you need to know where it's deployed and maybe who deployed it and what operating systems is it running on and where is it deployed in production. And you know what? If somebody tells me there's something wrong with it, where do I need to go to fix it and what are all the places I need to push it? I don't think it's really shift left anymore. It's just part of your software delivery lifecycle. In the same way that code reviews are part of your lifecycle, in the same way that testing is part of your lifecycle. And unlike some of those, though, it is pretty much, it permeates through the whole thing, right? It's not, a one-stop, I've done my security tick box, right? Because security doesn't stop when the application is deployed, right? Your software development lifecycle is still running. It's there. People are using it. If there's a security vulnerability, it has to go through and get there. And until it's not running, and you've done a new version that has probably different security problems, you need to keep improving that. So I don't think it's so much shift left. It's more about, for me now, DevSecOps feels like, how do you weave that into your process, and then how do you do that without slowing down development, without stifling innovation, without putting so many guardrails around the process that you never get any new products or features out the door, right? Because that breaks the whole point.
It's almost like, I'm going to get really geeky here for a second.
Okay.
It's almost like it's the fourth dimension. It's the space-time continuum, because it's everything at any point in time, right? Security is an issue throughout, both what everything looks like at this moment, as well as what it's going to look like the next second or minute or hour or day after that. So it's more like oxygen than it is a box. It's everywhere. Hopefully it's everywhere if you want to survive. Okay. So pull us back, reel me in from,
I can reel you in.
Interstellar movie.
I can reel you in. So the question did make me think about some of the newer things that are really exciting, like security as code. It's, secure by design, but now you're treating the configurations and policies like version controlled code, right? So your automation flows easier and it's in the flow of doing the work. So hopefully that's not too much of a slowdown. And there's a rise in companies that are looking at building out zero trust architectures, and those would impact the software development lifecycle and impact how you go to production. So those two newer things, I think, are starting to get a lot of interest. I haven't seen a ton of organizations like real world implementing this enterprise wide, but the buzz is there and picking up from conversations I've been part of.
The zero trust idea is something I've been thinking about too. Essentially, we want to take that, just like we want to use isolation as a method that security people use, right? To
Hmm.
help compartmentalize from a security standpoint.
Yeah.
Zero trust too, right? Because I may be fine in my microservice, but I have no idea what's happening on the other side of that API call that's coming in or out. Or
Exactly.
you may not even know if it's in my software or if it's going somewhere else.
True.
It could be anywhere. So there are some great security principles. Not that zero trust is this thing we've figured out in the security world. It's
Yeah.
still
No.
very much of it's almost like DevOps. It's much of an approach
Yes.
of doing things or rethinking how we do things rather than if I have the 6 products, I've got zero trust.
Yeah. No. Then you probably have uh, less security than you think if you're just saying, "Oh, let me pull this kit together," because now the concept of anti-fragility starts to kick in, right? The more systems you hook together, the more chance there is something's going to go terribly wrong.
Let's talk some more about the supply chain side of this.
Hmm.
So when we say software supply chain, are we only talking about sort of the things that come in externally to be part of what software we're building, creating, operating, testing, et cetera? Maybe the tool chain underneath that, or is the app part of the software supply chain itself? Is the supply chain the whole thing, or is it a subset of it? What's your opinion?
You
I think.
mean the actual app itself? Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean the
So
app that you're building?
yes, there's the app we're
Yeah, sorry.
building, and then
Okay.
there's everything else underneath it's running on and coming in to be part of that environment.
Yeah, sorry, Hope. I didn't mean to
Oh,
interrupt.
no, that's fine. I think it depends on the app you're building, right? There are some applications, one I worked on in the past, like for IoT devices, right? I think for a device that's IoT enabled, now you definitely are more concerned about that software bill of materials and what vulnerabilities are introduced, because that one deployment can go out to thousands and thousands of customers. But if I am building a website that is only giving information and no one is supplying anything and I know it is locked down, maybe I'm not as concerned because there's not really a bill of materials, let's say, associated with that website externally, but the things that and the applications and APIs that go into building that website absolutely would definitely be a concern.
Okay,
Martin's looking up. That means the
sorry,
computer
that
is
was my
engaged.
brain working there.
I can see the wheels moving.
I was
getting
really
to know each other too well here.
I was really thinking about what you were saying there about the website and the difference in the applications. It's an interesting one. I kind of feel like maybe it's just because I sometimes think it's easier to kind of say, actually, if as an organization you're gonna generate SBOMs, you're gonna get your SOLSA, your SOSA, I say SOLSA, I don't know how other people say it, but SOLSA, attestation stuff, you're gonna know the full life cycle of all your artifacts that make up your application, what was used to build them, what was used to test them, that underneath, and who owns those layers of that supply chain too is quite interesting. I might say, as a engineer who's building a piece of software or an application or a service that's part of an application, right? I might own that and all the dependencies and but actually a different team might own the supply chain for the tools that it's built on or the platform that it's deploying to, right? Sure. But I still feel like you need a way to have an aggregated view that says, hey, for application A, which is made up of these 23 services, which is running on this platform that we built and operate, that's running in this cloud, and it was built and deployed with these tools, somewhere I want an aggregation that tells me all the things that are in there.
Absolutely.
I want to be able to view all of those things. And one of the reasons I really want to be able to do that is going back to those like 0-day vulnerabilities. If you know all the places, right, and the artifacts, and what's in all your artifacts, and where all those artifacts are, then I genuinely sat there, and it it wasn't that particular one, but the Log4j. I genuinely sat there with Log4j, and I was responsible in the org I worked for like getting that, remediated across the 100 and something applications that we had. And honestly, it was spreadsheet time, right? We had Confluence pages and spreadsheets, and hey, it's in. Please go away, teams, and tell us if you've got this in your code, which is just, and the world has moved on a lot because of that kind of thing, but I never want to go back to that ever again. What I want to do is I want to go into my systems, and I just want to say, hey, tell me everywhere Log4j is, tell me what version they have. And actually, do you know what? We've got some AI wrapped around this, and it's going to tell me what I need to do to remediate those in those services, right? And then because I know everywhere they're deployed, I even know what pipelines to use to deploy them, to update them. I want to be able to do all of those things. And because maybe I'm sounding like a control freak now, and I don't mean to do that, but
hey, that's part of security.
Of information is, it's part of security. But the visibility of the information is like key. But if you don't collect it, you can't have the visibility, which is kind of why I talk about the Log4j thing, is because it was so painful for so many people because they just didn't know they had it or not. They had to go away and find out. It's like, well, I have a Java app and it might have it in there, but I don't know. And I think, we've moved on a lot, and, people are now interested in understanding what's in their applications. They are interested in where it's deployed, and all of those things. And I think we've moved on a long way, but it's still a thing. And I still worry about injection into the supply chain, as this build tool, is the build tool that you're using, is the scanner that you're using, is the library that you're using actually, latent, like dormant and sleeping and collecting information that's going to pump out somewhere. But because it's a weird dependency, you don't know. Or because, I've seen they did the hijack thing. So, I've seen where they hijacked a library. I think it was a node library or a UI library. They hijacked it. So loads of people were getting not the real library and they didn't even know.
Yeah.
Right. And because you don't have the right checks and balances in place and security to do that. We're seeing it progress.
Let's unpack a couple things that you've mentioned, Martin, and then let's, for the rest of our conversation, kind of bring it home to how do we go back and apply this to our SDLC, our DevOps pipeline workflows, et cetera. One thing you mentioned was SBOM, software bill of materials. There's a lot of emphasis around this of generating essentially an ingredients list, if you will, right, for what we've built, what we've created as part of a CI/CD process of what we've deployed. Sometimes it's even increasingly becoming part of contracts that we have to provide. The other thing you mentioned, maybe a little bit newer concept to some folks, is SLSA, which is supply chain levels of software artifacts. So essentially, it's a little bit more of a concept than it is a thing you produce. It's being able to say, here's all of the elements that are part of this, the environment, and how the security is determined, and the attestation of knowing that they are what they are. So bill of materials might have this library coming from an open source repository. Okay, great. But that could have a vulnerability in it. What's your process for how that gets brought into the supply chain and make sure that it's secure? And what's your process for maintaining that as you move forward? And can you demonstrate that? So it's kind of more the how than the what, is a super simple way to say it. Is that jive with what you all think for those two things?
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah. Good. One of the things we haven't talked about is some software composition analysis. I like to call it software decomposition analysis because I'm really kind of figuring out what's in there, right? Which is knowing what it is, what is all this stuff that's part of our build, and where did it come from? That obviously can be part of the build process, can be part of debugging or patching or fixing security vulnerabilities. Is that need to be in part of this ecosystem of security for DevSecOps? Do you think that's an important ingredient? Or is that a dumb question? Of course it should be.
Yeah, it's key because without it, it's going to be a lot harder to to trace out your vulnerabilities and understand what happened, right? Because if you don't know, track, or analyze the components that you have in your application, let's just say I don't want to be on that team that has to solve the problem if they don't have that information well cataloged and available.
I think that's very fair. I think that is, you do absolutely want it. And, you get some of it, through things like, depending on how good your SBOM is. And I can't remember it. I will find it so we can post in the links. There's actually a site, like an open source site, that you can post your SBOMs up and it will actually rate them for you, which is really interesting. So I will find that and share it so we can put it in the links. But it's like a really cool thing that you can like validate that, right? That you can, because, you kind of get that decomposition. And I think I mentioned it earlier, right? You bring something in to do job A, but it comes with B, C, D, E, and F, right? Or you've inserted an agent because you're using, I don't know, whatever monitoring tool, and it's running on your infrastructure that you're deploying your application on. Yeah, but what's that made of? What are the things that are in it? Is it secure? Is it safe? Do you know what it is? Do you know where it's sending the data? Is that safe? Is it secure? Does it meet your application's requirements? There's a whole raft of complex detail to get into. I think, I don't think the developer owns all of that information, by the way. I think that is back to the shared responsibility, and ownership of that, but depending on what your software is, the data that's in it, I think the level to which you need to go does vary, but, it's all about risk and your appetite for risk. And, what does it cost when you get hacked?
So you're saying if we're going to have our SBOMs graded or rated, we may someday have the SBOM awards?
Yeah, that would
winners
be
the best.
You know what? I love that. The SBOM awards.
Okay, so
that's sweet.
One of the things that kind of analogy that really works for me, because this is a safe environment. I can geek out with you all. I love to play video games and things and role-playing games. At the start of every role-playing game, the map is completely fogged, right? And the only way you find where you're going is by going somewhere and seeing what's over there. And that's what it's like without software composition analysis or an SBOM or some way. It's like, how do we figure it out? Yeah, I can go traversing through the repository and maybe I can find it that way, but what if it's not my stuff? How do I find where that is? So Hope, take it home for us. How do we do this? How do we do DevSecOps, improve the security kind of across those layers that we've talked about? How do you kind of put that plan in place instead of a simplistic shift left? And how do you do it in a way that the developers don't say, oh my God, I thought it was bad when you said shift left. This is worse. How do we not slow down their work?
Yeah, again, I feel like I'm going backwards in the conversation a little, but the investment, right? And involving them and actually understanding how they work and what their pain points are. There are some required things you will need to do, but you don't apply it in the same way. I had a conversation yesterday with a group, and we were talking about how at the macro level, every SDLC is the same. But once you dig down into it, it's very individualized and very personal. So really understand your software delivery lifecycle, how your developers are interacting with it, and build something that truly saves them toil, saves them time, effort, lets them work on the projects and the innovative work that they're there to do.
No, I can't disagree with any of that. I do think, there's always some investment with these things. I think last time we were talking about platform and how essentially your engineers are often your customers, right? If you're working in a platform engineering team, your engineers are your customers, and you do need to think about it in that way when you're bringing the tooling in. But I think there's always a balance, right? There's a balance of what's required, because that's the organization you're working for says these things must be part of your process, And then there's kind of the, well, what does great look like? Right? And there's normally a difference between the two, and some of the, you want to kind of encourage with carrot, and some of it is a little bit of stick, because it's, built-in policies that are part of your process that you can then validate, hey, your build pipeline doesn't have code scanning. I'm sorry, we're not going to build it until you put it in. But hey, here's a template that you can just add to your pipeline that lets you do that automatically, right? So you have to make it easy for them, right? So that they don't have to be experts in it. Make it easy for them to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing, really, is the general thing. But it is, it is kind of a journey. It's always going to take a little bit of money, but actually I think the financial cost of doing it is probably less than the culture of doing it, right? You have to make it part of your culture, and I think you can have if you go in and you have an idea, and I know I've used this quote before, but culture pretty much eats everything for breakfast. I know that's not the exact quote, but it does, right? If the culture of the organization is to do something X way, and you want to do it a different way, you have to change the culture, and changing the culture is hard. You have to take people on the journey. You have to help them understand the why. And then, and to the final point about not slowing them down, I do think it is, most of the modern tools now, they're getting smarter. They're making it easier to do those things. You can make it easy for people to add those security steps into their processes. You can make it easy for them to, know that they're doing the right thing, maybe know the right things that they should be working on, not the wrong things, right? Because we can do smart, prioritization of those security issues. And yeah, magical. I'm just my Harry Potter, right? But do like smart prioritization, so that they don't get the 500 security vulnerabilities, which is made up of 499 low and 1 high. You actually don't want them to look at the lows, but you really want them to look at that high, right? So you need to be able to, aggregate and simplify it for them. And, starting to see a lot of tools that will now say, hey, here's your security vulnerability, and I've looked at your code, and this is where it is. And do you know what? This, I'm going to make a PR for you. And then you can review that PR to make sure that I've not done anything terrible, right? So normal review process, normal, but AI can actually start to help solve some of those problems. There's a whole other thing about security and AI that I know we definitely don't have time to talk about. But you can start getting that benefit and still not slow them down, and maybe even speed them up. Actually, if we do it better, then the time you were spending on security, we're going to cut that by half or by whatever it is. And then actually the engineers get to do what they love most, which is generally solving problems, right? Making cool stuff. And, as I know all of us have sat there and written lines of code, making cool stuff is what we really enjoy.
As one of the Macintosh creators said, liberating electrons. But
yeah,
there's an interesting I've been commenting on a couple of questions that came in the chat, talking about, what about binaries? Like, how do you know if that stuff's secure, right? And actually there's software composition, source composition analysis, but there's also binary analysis tools that go with that. So when I get a binary, what is in this thing? I don't really know. It doesn't have a bill of materials. Maybe I don't even trust whether the bill of materials is right. I want to verify it. There's a binary analysis capabilities to that. And one of the practical things, and this is learning from our security brothers and sisters, because they understand these concepts very much so, which is you air gap things. You don't pull images and code libraries and updates directly from external repositories. They go through a process where they are pulled in kind of in a clean room or kind of an air gap type situation, and then placed in a trusted location, repository, whatever, that your build processes and development processes pull from. So reducing the chances of any random thing coming in and as part of whether you're building a server or you're building software, a virtual server, that helps, and where you got it and what you did to verify it, or if you need to do more next time, as opposed to, well, I pulled it down, it was good last time I used it, but who knows what happened since. mean, those are, you think you agree those are some practical steps? Yes, it takes a little bit more to set it up, but it certainly saves you when you have a problem. You got to go figure out how to get yourself out of it.
I agree, because having some controlled environment for those third party pieces that you're pulling in, maybe you have a virtual machine set up, maybe you have a debugger set up, but that way, again, like you're saying, it's air gapped, it's in a safe room. You can monitor what systems it's trying to call, how memory access is working, how the program itself is operating. It feels very fun and forensic, but it can be very necessary, and especially if you're working in some critical industries like healthcare, defense, other things like that. I think they have those practices built in because they can't afford to have those vulnerabilities make their way out.
It is, but it is like, I think you do have to make the right choices and the right, like that's right for the organization, right? Because I agree, sometimes that is, but all of those things is like whitelisting what dependencies are allowed and what are not. There has to then be a process for managing what comes in and when and who and what gets a whitelist and what version it is and change it. So, you have to do all of those things with your eyes open. I think they're good choices, honestly. they're definitely good choices. And especially, I've worked in healthcare myself, and, they are very precious about their environments. So, the last thing you want is, patient notes leaking, or, the ambulance not turning up because because some system isn't working, right? They are very, but interestingly, sometimes that has the negative effect of making remediation in those environments really slow. So something's already in there, and now we know it's a vulnerability, and now it's a problem. I know of a particular healthcare provider who, while all the software was up to date, they hadn't fixed a patch in their Active Directory servers. So, they were breached via the Active Directory servers, right? That is like so, you can do all the things right and still get it wrong. And this kind of, I know it plays back, I know I'm looping back a little bit, but, sometimes having those practices isn't always solving all the problems. And it's always a balance. I think in the right place, but you have to remember it has to have governance and time and people and effort behind it, or as you were saying, I hope, money.
Yeah, and in every organization, all of those things are limited, so you do have to prioritize. Yeah.
I mean, I love doing this with you all because I can ask you, here's something I've been thinking about. Tell me your thoughts about it. How would we think differently about DevSecOps if we thought of it as a platform, right? That's a kind of a mental shift we've done a lot with DevOps, thinking of DevOps as a platform. Platforms that we're deploying onto, which is more, a loose definition would be a systematic approach to it, and not just an integrated piece of piece parts that all kind of together, cobbled together, look like it kind of solves the problem, but does it in a way that it can work across multiple workflows or parts of the SDLC. Should we think about it at DevSecOps as a platform? Hope you have a platform in your title, so you get the first shot at this by default.
I think that's a great way to think of it, to give an understanding of the holistic nature of it, right? And how all the pieces are interconnected, instead of seeing them as individual parts, individual islands, right? Because now you are bringing in the concept of, yes, we need integrated security tools and processes because we are a platform, and hopefully we have working and mostly seamless integrations. What is our automation and orchestration across this platform? So it enables our security tasks, and the flexibility and scalability of it. If you think of it as a platform now, maybe you are going to make different design choices when you are building out your tool sets, because you are thinking a little more of a platform that could expand and change. Yeah.
Okay, Martin.
I can see
Is that the I'll pass on this?
No, that was not the I'll pass on it. That was the stroking the beard thoughtfully. Yeah.
The ponder look. Okay, all right.
Ponder.
I mean, I work for Harness. We build a platform, like we are building a platform. We would love to say, I'm very much trying to keep vendor agnostic in this conversation, but it's relevant in this particular instance. So, and that is what we would try and, what you're talking about is the same thing we would try and do, and in fact, I'm going to talk about our internal platform, not our external one. But within our internal platform, so the way we build our software, and the security practices and patterns that we have in place, actually a lot of it is driven by that kind of like, we need a service that does X. We need a way to take something off the shelf that's going to work again and again and again and again and again. Because, like any reasonable size organization, we have multiple teams. We want consistency. We definitely need security in what we deliver. We need to be able to remediate security issues very, very quickly, right? Because actually other companies rely on us to build their software securely. So, I do think that idea of thinking about security as a platform service or part of a platform, I think it's definitely part of a platform approach, right? You build security into your platform and you build security into the services that your platform offers, right? And so whether that be something that, they take and use, or whether that be something that they consume, if that makes sense. I mean, I always like that consumption-based model. Hey, somebody's already done this. Let's do it. Let's use it again already, right? But reuse or consumption, it's all good. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. I think we probably do it already. We just don't necessarily call it that. I think places do that already. I certainly have spoken to organizations who treat security that way. So I think it's there, but I think it's also sometimes difficult to visualize. That's why I had stroking beard face. I was trying to visualize it as a platform. I'm applying what I think of as platform principles to the way like we consume security, or the way other organizations consume security. And actually it kind of is, right? And actually if you're building like a developer platform or a platform internally that your engineers are going to use, then very much it should be all the way through.
Yes. Agreed.
It's a powerful concept. And I know for not only the folks here, but one of the companies I've talked to for the AI, the services that they expose and also use in their apps, they built it as a platform that all their apps use, right? I mean, there's a lot of power in this approach, not to overuse or just call something a platform for platform's sake. But I hope any parting words here. We got 3 minutes left. I want to ask folks to also fill out not only the cloud AppSec survey, but we have a survey about the webinar today. We'd love your feedback. Was this useful? Really, engaging, exciting content? Was it just Mitch pontificating and Martin and Hope trying to make some sense out of it? Well, tell us what you thought. We'd love to hear from you. So, Hope, any parting thoughts?
My only parting thought is, if you didn't watch the other 3, you should, because this is a great, it was a great build up to get to this session, and all of the pieces are so interwoven, right? It's like a great limited series on Netflix. So if you missed the other 3 episodes,
we are in negotiation with Netflix to make a series. Or not. Certainly wouldn't we be on it. Martin, any parting thoughts?
Aside from me wondering who's going to play me, no, I would agree. Definitely, awesome. Definitely go watch the other 3. I'm in one other, and I enjoyed it very much. But yeah, no, this has actually been a really interesting session. I think there's been some really interesting things. I'm always open to anybody getting in contact afterwards. I know that stuff's shared anyway, but I'm always happy to talk about any of this stuff. As you've noticed, I like to talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, come find me and have a look, and I'm more than happy to chat and carry on the conversation.
Great. You can find any of us on LinkedIn. We're
Yeah.
easy to find, so
Yes.
it's one great way to find us.
Mhm.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Sometimes we have to step back for a bit and say, okay, there's a different way to think about this, and what would be the benefits of doing that? And I think was our goal today. We didn't solve the world's problems. Election's not over, and there's not peace across the globe.
Don't
Well,
have
maybe
that
we'll
Netflix deal
not
signed
yet.
yet.
That's tomorrow's webinar. But hopefully we've advanced the concepts of DevSecOps
Mhm.
in a way that can help us more systemically build, create, operate, run, and secure technology. So thank you so much for everybody who commented, who filled out a survey, who asked a question.
Mhm.
You really helped shape our conversation today. So
Yeah.
Hope, always a pleasure. Really enjoy everything you contribute to our discussions and challenge us with. And Martin, it's great to do some interpretive analysis on your reactions. Now that's a new skill I'm developing. But
Yeah.
no, seriously, given everybody's insights in working with platforms and whether it's the products we have today or past experiences, super valuable. So thanks for sharing that too. Thanks to you both. Thanks, Cody, for helping us put this on. And thank you to Harness and CloudBees and JFrog for sponsoring today's conversation.
All right.
We just hit the top of the hour. Here's your time back. Go enjoy that next Zoom call. Hopefully not. Get back to code some stuff. Write some code.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.